Mark Guggenheim, who was the showrunner on Arrow for years and on Legends for years, and also who helmed some of the crossovers, posted something pretty cool on Instagram the other day. Basically, this was a whiteboard from the Burbank studios where some of the Arrowverse shows are filmed and written and planned and all of that, and this whiteboard had apparently not been wiped since planning of Crisis on Infinite Earths. So we got a little glimpse into the original notes for Crisis on Infinite Earths, mainly just part 1, which was the Supergirl episode, and even then we don't get to see the full notes for this episode, but we do get an idea of what most of the original plan for that episode was, and there's some pretty damn interesting things on here though. Like, something pretty damn interesting though is that the notes have been put up on the whiteboard way before the final script or final drafts for the episodes were written, because there are things mentioned on here like a Krypton cameo and the Phantom Zone playing what seems to be a pretty huge part of the crossover, and there are things that would have had to have been planned way before like the episode was filmed. So now obviously we know that the Phantom Zone ended up basically not being in Crisis at all, so this would have had to have been written a crazily long time before the actual episode was filmed. We can sort of pinpoint the time frame though, because Cameron Cuff, who plays Segel in Krypton, revealed in September 2019 that he was supposed to be in Crisis but couldn't be because of scheduling, and since this whiteboard has Krypton listed as one of the cameo worlds, I think it's safe to say this was at least written before September 2019, which is kind of crazy it hasn't been wiped off in coming up on 2 years. But really quick before getting started, I just want to ask if you can please subscribe to the channel if you're not already. I make DC and Marvel videos every single week, and new subscribers really do help to keep up the motivation to make new videos. But anyway, let's talk about this. So there is quite a lot of stuff on this whiteboard, and some of it is almost identical to what we see in the actual crossover, but some of it is surprisingly different. Now, it looks like the crossover was always planned to open with Marno Vu giving us a monologue about the multiverse, and then for us to see various TV shows and Other Earths cameo and all of that. What we ended up seeing in the actual episode was a cameo of Titans, a cameo of Batman 1989, a cameo of Batman 1966, and then Earth X. On these original notes, we can see that they wanted the opening to have Titans, Doom Patrol, Swamp Thing, Stargirl, Black Lightning, Krypton, and Gotham. So there are a bunch more than we actually saw. And the only one of these that actually made it into the opening was Titans. We then saw Doom Patrol, Stargirl, and Swamp Thing at the end of the crossover, and then Black Lightning never got one of the Earth cameos, but over on his show, there was basically a whole episode dedicated to seeing the Black Lightning's Earth get destroyed. And then Krypton and Gotham didn't get featured at all. Now, I'm a little unsure on Gotham, because it definitely is possible that by Gotham they meant the 1989 Batman or even the 1966 Batman. But the fact that most of the shows are listed by show and not by location makes me feel like they mean Gotham the show, like the Fox 5-season Gotham show. Like, if they meant just a location, Gotham, then they probably would have wrote Freeland instead of Black Lightning on this board. So this is possible that, like, they were trying to get Gotham, and when they couldn't get Gotham, they ended up going for the Batman 89 version of Gotham and the Batman 66 version of Gotham as like a substitute. But this is honestly really cool if this does mean Gotham the show, because in terms of TV shows, the lack of Gotham representation was kind of glaring, since it is such a recent show, and it's like one of the only recent DC TV shows that played no role at all in this crossover. I know that there are a lot of people out there that would have loved to have seen it or see some of the characters pop up. The problem here may have been Fox though, because I'm not sure what the deal with rights and licenses are, but the fact that Gotham aired on Fox and could even be owned by Fox themselves, now Disney, could have meant it was just not possible to use footage or characters from the show. In terms of Krypton, like I said earlier, Cameron Cuff was supposed to appear but couldn't in the end. Now, something that's interesting here is that even though we knew Krypton would play a part or could play a part, this isn't what any of us thought it would be, because around March last year, Mark Guggenheim said that the Krypton cameo was going to be Cameron's version of Segel appearing as a hologram of the Earth 38 version of Seg on Argo, along with Allura and the rest of the Kryptonians and all that. So it's possible we were technically going to have 2 Krypton cameos, which would have been really cool. Now, with Black Lightning and Stargirl, I'm also kind of interested in how this would have worked, because Black Lightning's mid-season final aired a day after part 1 of Crisis aired, and their mid-season final was an episode completely devoted to the red skies appearing over Freeland. It was just one of the best episodes that Black Lightning has ever put out, honestly. Like, no Arrowverse characters appeared in that episode at all, but the episode was connected like it was a comic book, where we know huge events are happening somewhere else, and the effects of that event are then seeping into the other titles. I feel like if they rearranged the Black Lightning schedule so that it was on break before Crisis, we probably wouldn't have gotten such an awesome mid-season final. So personally, for that, I'm happy things worked out this way. Stargirl is a weird one though, because these cameos always featured a character looking at the red skies approaching, and this was easy to use with Titans as they could just use old footage, and since we knew those characters where it was fine. Stargirl might have not worked out that well though, because at this point we had not seen a single episode of the show yet, so they couldn't just use the team up shot that we see at the end of Crisis as the opening here, since it wouldn't match the whole red sky worrying backdrop sort of thing. So it would have been cool to see what they would have done there. Maybe it's the fact that this didn't really make a whole lot of sense, that they ended up just putting Stargirl in the end only, because I actually do remember there was a rumor or some kind of leak like in the month or two before Crisis aired that was saying like Stargirl was going to be in part 1 of Crisis or something, so it could have been possible that this was very, very close to when the episode actually came out, that Stargirl was supposed to be in this episode. Now after all this, we cut to Argo getting destroyed and Baby John being put in a pod, almost exactly like it plays out in the episode itself, but there's a difference here. Underneath it says Hooded Pariah Point of View, so it looks like Pariah or Nash was supposed to play a much more important role in the crossover, and I really would have liked to see this honestly, because personally as a whole I didn't think he added near as much to the overall crossover as he should have, so seeing Pariah kind of watching some of these events before revealing himself at the end of part 1 would have been awesome in my opinion. Then we have the DEO realizing something is wrong, likely alluding to Kara seeing Argo get destroyed, which is exactly what we see happen in the episode, and then we once again have another change. Now I can't really make out or read this part the best. It says that John's pod lands in Kansas of another universe, and I can't tell what universe this says. It looks like it does have or did have an actual universe designation. Like it does look like they wrote something there to mean a very specific universe, possibly another cameo from another show or something, but it got rubbed off. So I'm really interested to know what universe or where they were planning on having John land. It's possible that they were trying to have a cameo for a TV show and tie that into this storyline, but they couldn't make the cameo work, so they ended up changing it, because underneath this then it says that John could also land in 2046 Star City, which is what we eventually saw. So the Star City plotline may have been the plan B for this, except here it said that old Diggle finds John and not the old Oliver, which is what we see in the episode. Now this is crazy, because the way it says old Diggle makes me assume that they mean actual John Diggle and not Connor Hawke, which Connor would have made sense in the context of this universe, but seeing an old Diggle would have been awesome, since it's something I don't think the Arrowverse has actually done at all yet. I also think Diggle was sidelined way too much in this crossover, so seeing this here would have been great. My only thing against this is that I thought the old Oliver scenes were actually really well done and emotional, so I would have hated to lose those, but again, seeing old Diggle would have been really cool. If they could somehow made both of them work, that would have been awesome. Next part of the crossover goes almost exactly the same. Lila travels throughout the multiverse and grabs all the heroes and then brings them to Earth 38. Some slight differences here is that Lila apparently was supposed to grab Mick as well as Ray and Sarah, because we know in the actual crossover Mick isn't in part 1 at all. It also says Lila grabbed Lois and Clark, so I think it's possible we were supposed to see her grab the two from Argo rather than what actually happened, which was not seeing them until they show up on Earth 38. Another cool difference here is that Pariah was supposed to show up in the DEO here as well, giving the This Universe is Doomed speech, because this was something that we didn't actually see until the end of part 1 when Oliver is dying and taken back to Earth 1. Now it's quite hard to make out a lot of Act 3. It says that Lila gives us an info dump, which is what happened at this point in the actual episode. You can kind of make out something to do with Barry and Oliver, which I would assume is the scene where Barry tells Oliver that he is due to die in Crisis as well, and Oliver gets pissed and starts yelling for Novu. There's something about natural disasters, which I would imagine means that we would have got to see some bad things happen around Earth 38 as a result of Crisis. I can't remember anything like this happening in the actual episode. Then we have the team split, which is what happened in the episode. Then we have something about the Phantom Zone, and if I was to make a guess, Team Supergirl decides to use the Phantom Zone portal in the Fortress, or possibly use Lena's help to make a portal or something to send as many people on Earth 38 to the Phantom Zone as possible. We saw none of this in the actual episode, but I'm actually honestly not too annoyed we didn't see anything like this, as I think what we saw worked in the context, and what we saw was a good substitute with them all just coming to Earth 1. Plus, I don't know how the Phantom Zone plot would have worked, because technically Earth 1 should have their own, technically Earth 38 should have their own Phantom Zone, which would mean that when Earth 38 goes down, so should their Phantom Zone, unless they made up a rule that Phantom Zone is outside of the multiverse or outside of Crisis or whatever, which creates a whole other group of problems. Then you have to wonder why they didn't just start sending everybody there. But the next part says that Mia, Rory and Alex are the ones that go after Baby John, and that is completely different to what we saw in the actual episode, because in the episode it ended up being Lois, Brainiac 5 and Sarah, and this would have completely changed how the second half of the episode goes. I also wonder why they chose this group, because in the actual episode it made sense why we saw Lois, it made sense why we saw Sarah both go on the mission, whereas I can't really think of any reason why Mia, Rory and Alex would go on this one. Then we have the Shadow Demons part. Difference here though is that we were supposed to see them possess people, which would have made them 10 times scary in my opinion. This could have been that like civilians on Earth 38 ended up fighting our heroes, or we could have seen some members of the heroes get briefly possessed. Personally, I'm glad we did not see this, because even though things would have been hella more scary, I think that I think it would have been a lot of screen time going to something we don't necessarily need to see. Then something about sleeper agents destroying the towers, which probably alludes to like some of the possessed people taking down the towers. Maybe some of the heroes were like secretly possessed by the shadow demons, and then they took down the towers because of that. Obviously nothing like the actual episode where we just had Clark and Kara constantly need to use their heat vision to keep the towers up. The next part goes quite similar except for one crucial difference. So it seems Oliver was always meant to die in part 1, sacrificing himself for Earth 38, but the difference here is that Jean and Alex would be getting civilians to the Phantom Zone rather than rather than Earth 1. Now again, this would have been a neat plotline to see for sure, but I just think that the route we actually saw made much more sense in the context of Crisis and in the context of the episode. Now the final part is kind of hard to read, but it seems like it went very similar. Just likely Pariah says something different, as his "everyone is doomed" speech came much earlier in the episode. But yeah, that's everything we can make out from the original notes, and this is just from part 1. Like, look at how many differences there were in just this one episode alone. Like, it's possible that parts 2 to 5 are just absolutely completely different on the original notes. But what do you think about these notes? Would you rather to see this episode, or would you rather see what we got? And if you enjoyed this video at all, please do remember to subscribe. We can hopefully hit 600 pretty soon, which will be awesome, and like and share and all of that, and I hope you have an awesome day.